It was early morning, and as usual, the small band of men found themselves walking down a dirt road, heading towards Jerusalem. It was Wednesday, the last full day of freedom their master would have, and he was determined to make the most of it. Hi, I'm Louis Marsh, Senior Pastor of River Church, and I welcome you to this episode of Tales from the Scrypt as we continue to work through the week before the first Easter, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Today, we're going to continue our journey with a little story I like to call Predicting a Betrayal. The first thing that happened that morning was they saw the tree that Jesus had cursed the day before, and it was dead. They stood silently before it, as did Jesus. And then he did what he so often did. He used whatever was to hand as a teaching aid, and he did not talk about how the tree could represent fruitless, faithless Israel, nor did he speak of God's judgment as you might have expected. Instead, he used the tree as an example of how a tiny little bit of faith could do great and amazing things. Although his listeners did not know it, he was trying to prepare them for the shock that was less than 48 hours in their future. Jesus headed to the temple to teach again. The day went as usual, Jesus teaching and amazing everyone who listened to him with an open heart. The Jewish leaders questioning him, trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, and then retreating in failure. It was the same old game that they had played against Christ and had lost for years, but they still played it. But this time, that was not all his enemies did. They decided that Jesus must die, but not during the feast of the Passover, as that might arouse the people. Then they caught a break, as their clandestine contacts with some of Jesus' followers brought them at last to Judas. He made it clear that he was willing to strike a bargain. Taking a break from the teachings during the day, he slipped away to meet with the leaders of Israel. Judas asked them how he would profit from turning over Jesus to them, and they made him an offer that he accepted. He demanded payment first, and the leaders were so desperate to rid themselves of Jesus that they paid him in advance. It only cost them 30 pieces of silver to set up the ambush. People say that everything has a price. In the law of Moses, 30 pieces of silver was the price for a slave's accidental death. Judas showed himself to be nothing but a slave to fear, and that the price for his soul was very cheap indeed. Judas willingly took their money, showing how little he even valued himself, and before it was all over, he would echo a prophecy from Zechariah, but that would come later. While Judas was off plotting to betray his master to death, what was Jesus doing? Well, along with teaching and debating, he was also being prophetic. He knew what Judas was doing, and so once again predicted what was about to happen. But because he knew that time was growing short, he was even more blunt and more specific than he had ever been before. You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified, he said. You know this, he said. Jesus was reminding them of what they did not know that they knew. He had said this before, but they simply could not or would not accept his words. Now, a mere 2 days away, he drove the truth home into their hearts once again. And once more, his words found rocky soil. The disciples were clearly in denial when it came to this topic. They had been taught all their lives that the Messiah would come. Exactly what he would do had been explained to them many, many times. Being betrayed and killed was most definitely not on the Messiah's to-do list as far as they were concerned. They knew the entire prophetic timetable of events like the back of their hands. No one had ever said anything to them about the Messiah suffering, bleeding, and dying, and then returning to life. Oh, sure, those verses, they were in the Old Testament, but they were largely ignored or explained away. No, they knew Messiah would come to set up God's rule on earth, and that rule would be done through Israel. So they quite simply rejected Jesus' words. These things could not, must not be true, so they refused to believe them. How little has human nature changed? People today, they do exactly the same thing when faced with truth that they don't want to hear. However, Jesus would not force anyone to believe, but he put it all on the record so that when they looked back at all of it, they'd know he'd been straight with them and that it was their refusal to believe the truth that had caused them to fall. So while Jesus was telling his followers unwanted truth, Judas and the Jewish leaders were busy lying to each other and everybody else as they plotted his downfall. It would happen fast, but Jesus, he was ready, and he knew exactly what they were up to. Join me next week as we continue to move through Holy Week towards the greatest event in all of history, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. My name's Louis Marsh, Senior Pastor of River Church here in Parker, Arizona. Check out the QR code right over there, and you will see a QR code that will take you to my other podcast, The Ultimate Sacrifice, where we look at the great sacrifice and service that men and women have made for our country throughout the years. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. If you could give us a thumbs up, especially if you could give us a subscribe, it would be such a big help for the channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.